Hello everybody. Today I want to talk about what's going on in Washington state politics. We have the gubernatorial election coming up here November 3rd. We're just about 7 weeks out, and this is a big race. We have a lot going on in the state of Washington, a lot that is being in the national news with what's taking place in Puget Sound and the city of Seattle specifically, CHOP, Chaz, Antifa, the riots that took place following the George Floyd murder, and all of the chaos and the fallout from the proposals for police reform, from City Hall to the resignation of Chief Carmen Best of the Seattle Police Department, and to the current state in the new interim police chief and restructuring and defunding, as it were, of the police department in Seattle. And with all of that in mind, and so much change and so little time for things to come together, they're going to be kind of just constantly changing the next few weeks, the next few months. I wanted to talk about some of the things that are really happening that are impacting the voters in the state of Washington, and things that you may know about if you follow the local news on Cairo, Como, or any of the local affiliates in Seattle. You probably know pretty well what's going on, but there's a little more detail underneath the layers. You know, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that people may not be as aware of or dialed into. And I think it's safe to say that everybody realizes that we have a big election coming up, not just on the presidential stage, but on the statewide stage. Governor Inslee ran for president earlier in the campaign cycle with the rest of the Democrats. He didn't do so well. He was out as of last year, and he's been busy with COVID and making claims of climate change and things that are causing these wildfires. And there's maybe a little more to it than that. But what I want to touch on right now in this particular video is some specific things. What's going on within the Democratic and the Republican parties, the candidates who are up for election, and some of those candidates who may not actually be on the ballot, but could and should be on the ballot. And so what I'm going to talk about to kind of kick it off is mentioning Governor Inslee. He's up for his third term as governor here. He ran against Rob McKenna, former Attorney General, back in 2012, and he won. He ran against Bill Bradley in 2016, won re-election. He's up against Republic Washington Police Chief Lauren Culp now, the Republican candidate, in 2020. And I'm a big supporter of Culp. I've made that very well known. I've gone to Culp's rallies. I support him. I have some of his video clips on my page, just some brief excerpts of rallies that he's done, and he refers to them as protests because the mask mandate is not enforced in his rallies, and there has been no recorded cases of COVID being spread from going to see him. So Culp is a big constitutionalist. He believes in freedom, he believes in liberty, and he also believes in law and order. And I think he's the perfect candidate for Washington. I just hope the rest of the people can see the value and the merit that he brings. Culp isn't trying to rewrite the laws. He's not trying to reinvent the wheel. He's not trying to do away with existing laws that are on the books. He just wants to keep things in check. And the violence and chaos that's happened in Seattle in the last few months is something he definitely does not want to see perpetuate. At Culp's rally that I saw in Gold Bar here in Snohomish County a couple of months ago, we had a visit from Snohomish County Sheriff Adam Fortney. He came out. He was one of the first speakers. Sheriff Fortney has been under a lot of attack lately. There have actually been petitions of up to 4 different charges against him. 2 of them are tied to Fortney's public criticism of the governor. He had stated back in April that Inslee had violated people's constitutional rights by forcing a pandemic coronavirus type of stay-at-home order and a mask mandate that would follow. 2 claims about that came out, and they went viral on Facebook. Governor Inslee tried to slap a suit on him and go after him. Petitions will also include a 3rd claim that Fortney exercised discretion in a manifestly unreasonable manner by rehiring 3 deputies fired for misconduct by the previous sheriff. The nature of the misconduct and the nature of the rehire is not clear. What these employees did specifically, whether they were rehabilitated, they went through a program, they had to undergo some sort of training, never made clear. So I don't know how severe those claims are. I know in Washington state, the hype that goes against conservative politics is usually significant. And so that has to be underlined in this particular instance. The 4th charge that was alluded to earlier was actually tossed out, and that was a recall brought forth by petitioners who wanted and still want to have the sheriff's title revoked from him and have a retally of a new vote to see who could replace him. And that dealt with a public statement made in a case in which the sheriff deputy tackled a black medical worker who was accused of jaywalking. That was obviously tossed out because there was not significant merit in that. But again, I don't know the full details of the story. They weren't provided, and so it's fair not to speculate. When reached for comment, Colin McMahon, who's a public defender for one of the 4 local attorneys who was trying to oust Sheriff Fortney, said, quote, "We're ecstatic. The most important charge from the folks I've spoken to so far is the rehiring charge, which was just referred to. That's what I think is going to be a tipping point for this effort, and we're going to be finalizing petitioners tonight." This is a story that came out just a few days ago, so this would be over the weekend, and start collecting earlier this week to get a petition to remove Sheriff Fortney. When reached for comment, Mark Lamb of Bothell, who is Adam Fortney's attorney, said that the silver lining in the decision is that they still have 180 days for the recall, which takes us out to about March 10th of 2021 to gather valid signatures of about 45,000 registered voters in Snohomish County. And if they're successful, an election would be held between 45 and 90 days, and the signature count would be certified by the Snohomish County Elections Office. Lamb said, quote, "We're encouraged that the Supreme Court threw out the most extreme of the anti-police claims made by the recall proponents." He said a reference to a claim involving the arrest of the jaywalker. The remaining claims are meritless and will be thrown out by the people of Snohomish County in due time. And the state Supreme Court cleared the way this past Thursday for signature gathering to begin in a second recall effort. This is now the second time they've tried to oust Sheriff Adam Fortney. And I did get a chance to briefly meet with and get to hear from Fortney, and he is a exceptional guy. He's a law enforcement officer who cares about his community, cares about his family, and he cares about the laws and the people of Washington and Snohomish County's rights. And I think what's happening to him is kind of a railroading operation. But with that in mind, that kind of dovetails into the other segment of this local Washington politics piece that I wanted to share. And this has to do with the gubernatorial elections, but more importantly, the lieutenant governor election. Because if those of us who were looking at the ballot recently prior to the August 4th primaries recall, there was a significant list of candidates, I believe about 35 running for governor and almost as many running for lieutenant governor. Current lieutenant governor, Cyrus Habib, who is a really good politician in my opinion. He's a guy who's overcome a lot of obstacles. He's a job creator. He is somebody who can reach across party lines, and he's struggled against, a lot of, disabilities, being blind and things that other people may not be able to have done. He has done. And so party lines aside, I give him credit. Lieutenant Governor Habib will not be running for re-election, however. And the top choice for Lieutenant Governor, and I say top choice because of nearly 20 people in the field, he scored 25% of the vote, is Congressman Denny Heck, a Democrat, obviously from Washington. And the unique thing about this is that there's two people who are up for the lieutenant governor spot who made it through the primaries. Mark Elias, also a Democrat, is the other candidate. And Elias has 18.5%. So he's not too far behind Denny Heck, but he is a Democrat. They're both Democrats. Some things that are important to note about both of these candidates. Number one, starting with Congressman Heck. Heck endorsed Hillary Clinton for the Democratic primary in 2016. No surprise there. He voted yeah on impeaching Donald Trump. something where his state of Washington, in Snohomish County, in Everett, at the Providence Medical Center, the first noted case of the coronavirus originated in January of this year, and Heck was intent on impeaching the president. And if you saw the congressional hearings, you remember hearing his testimony, you remember hearing his questions. He was obviously not focused on what was impacting his state at the time. He was focused on getting the president out of office. Heck served in Washington's House of Representatives from 1976 until 1986 and served as the majority leader. Bear this in mind, 44 years in politics. Heck is basically the state of Washington's Joe Biden. What has he done? In the last year, since the impeachment hearing and the run for lieutenant governor, that's the most I've ever heard about Heck. Prior to that, I could barely tell you what he did. I know that Heck was a Washington congressman for 10 years, but there was a lag from 1986 until January 3rd of 2013 when he actually became a U.S. congressman, and his term ends in 2021. And aside from supporting Hillary Clinton and trying to impeach the president and now running for lieutenant governor, Heck doesn't have a lot to his resume that's impressing me. Mark Elias, on the other hand, 18.5% of the vote, served on the Mukilteo City Council and was student director of the Mukilteo School Board. He's the only other viable candidate that they can come up with. This to me just seems like the voters in Washington are not getting a full scoop. So that brings us to the GOP. When you talk about Governor Inslee as the incumbent, you have to talk about Inslee's primary opponent, which is Republic Police Chief Loren Culp, a longtime entrepreneur, chief of police since 2016 in the city of Republic, and a man who believes in people's constitutional rights. As I said, his videos are on my page. Check them out. Take a look. They're quick, entertaining, and full of energy. Culp is a guy who has a lot to offer, and he can change the direction of Washington. He's not going to kill climate initiatives. He's not going to take away your rights. He's not going to endanger people's personal safety and expose us to COVID. Culp has said himself time and time again that he will have daily consultations with scientific and medical experts, and he will give press briefings letting the experts do the talking. Just because Culp supports our president and supports law and order does not mean that he's going to run the state the way that the president runs the country. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just something that some people who may be on the fence need to be aware of. And some of the really important quotes that Culp gave were, and this is on his campaign information, and just so people know, Culp came in with about 17.5%, maybe 18% of the vote. He had 4 or 5 other Republican candidates on the ticket with him running against Inslee, who took just over 50% of the vote. When you tally it all up and you direct all of those votes, and hopefully the Republicans are still going to vote the Republican ticket, Culp has a viable chance, and I really think he would be a great leader for the state. So Culp says, when you elect Loren Culp for governor, you'll have a governor who will protect your rights. He has a proven record of keeping his oath of office and standing up for the citizens he works for. Culp says, in my administration, the needs of families will come first for the first time in over 3 decades, referring to the prior administration of John Spellman, who was the last Republican governor for Washington, whose term ended in 1985. We will protect all workers and make sure our families earn an honest day's pay for an honest day's work. We will implement clean energy solutions without raising costs through cap and trade and give our state a green solution for our energy independence that works while protecting our waterways and forests and sportsmen and tribes. So Inslee's green initiative is not something that's going to be eradicated, erased, or done away with. Culp is on the very same page. It's just his fundamental opinion and his directions politically are different. And I don't think that he wants to impose rule of law and force mandates on people like Inslee does. And for those who support Inslee, I ask you, what did he do for the people of Seattle? He didn't even address the riots and the chaos. He turned a blind eye and addressed his anger and hostility towards the president, which seems to be a constant for him. And I don't know about you, but I don't like people who scapegoat. I like people who take accountability for their actions. We all make mistakes, but own it. So with that in mind, we talked about the governor, we talked about the governor's candidates, we talked about Culp. We talked about lieutenant governor on the Democratic ticket. There are two. We've got Denny Heck, congressman, and Mark Elias, both running for the Democratic position of lieutenant governor. Now, there is nobody on the ticket for lieutenant governor in the Republican Party. However, former Bothell Mayor Joshua Freed, who was until August 4th running on the Republican ticket for governor of Washington, has become the heir apparent for a write-in candidate. I want to emphasize how important it is that we elevate the awareness of Joshua Freed and we get him in there. You talk about a guy who really cares about his community, who cares about his state, and I've had a chance to hear from Freed quite a bit too. A lot of people might say, well, Freed's a rhino. He's a Republican in name only. Based on what? I have no idea. But I hear that, and I think that comes from fear that people are playing the political card and they want to get into a certain, office and then switch the script. Nothing can be further from the truth. Look at Joshua Freed's webpage. Check out his political standpoints. Go to the Washington government gubernatorial elections 2020 website. See what Freed stands for. Freed is running for the election of lieutenant governor of Washington. He declared candidacy as a write-in candidate scheduled after the August 4th primaries. Write his name in, Joshua Freed. He was mayor of Bothell, elected by city council from 2014 to 2016. He was a member of the Bothell City Council, from 2006 until 2018. He helped build health centers and homes and wells for people who were struggling with infrastructure in Kenya and the Philippines. He serves as the chair of Protect a Child Today as a mental health counselor on the King County Mental Health Advisory Board, the Puget Sound Regional Council Economic Development, the East King County Chambers of Commerce Legislative Coalition, and the East Side Transportation Partnership. Joshua Freed also co-sponsored Referendum 90 to repeal the extreme new kindergarten through 12th grade sex education curriculum, which is absolutely absurd, in my opinion. He even wrote the check that paid for the petitions to be printed. Freed stated in his candidacy for governor that he will not collect a check. His intention is to help his community and build a better society in the state of Washington. And Jay Inslee backed down on Joshua Freed when he challenged his unconstitutional executive order that allowed for marijuana stores to be open but prohibited religious gatherings, showing that his values are not Republican in name only, but in truthful conservative values. So if you hear this, you're on the fence, you're not totally clear on who's running, you're maybe not sure who you want to vote for, because I know if you're going to vote for Inslee, you're going to vote regardless. If you're going to vote for who's on the ticket for lieutenant governor, you're only going to have Democrats to choose from. But people have a right, and our constitutional right says you can choose whomever you'd like. Lauren Culp, Republican, candidate for governor, law and order candidate, constitutionalist, and Joshua Freed, write-in candidate, Republican, for lieutenant governor. I hope this gives people a little bit more information on what's going on in the state of Washington. As I mentioned, if you watch local news, you get a bit of it. If you watch Brandy Cruz on Q13 Fox, you might get a little bit more information on what's going on politically. But stay informed, stay engaged, and let's have peaceful, constructive dialogue, because that's something this state and this country need more than ever right now. Everybody stay safe, and I'll keep you informed.